Hello and welcome back to Three Princesses in a Muggle World. My name is Jenny and I am joined as always by my two best friends and co-hosts.
Hey everyone, it's Amber.
And Kasey, welcome back. We've got a special episode tonight. And since this was Amber's brainchild, she can kind of tell us what are we focusing in on tonight and why is it so special?
Okay, so tonight we're going to focus in on Fantasyland, specifically Fantasyland in Disneyland, but every once in a while we'll bring up little tidbits about Fantasyland in Disney World. And
And specifically Disneyland in California. Since there's so many.
yeah, Disneyland in California.
We're not going international just yet.
Sadly, no, because we haven't been international. I'm actually super jealous. One of my friends from high school just went on a trip to Disneyland Paris, and I'm like, we're not friends anymore. I'm not talking to you anymore because you went without me. It's fine. So Fantasyland, the original Fantasyland, did open up with the park in 1955, and that Walt had this like huge, massive vision of what he wanted Fantasyland to be, but didn't have the budget to actually bring that to life. But in 1982, Fantasyland, the majority of it was shut down and renovated to be able to be the Fantasyland that Walt envisioned. Things have changed throughout the years to today's date, but the biggest renovation was definitely that one. And Fantasyland reopened as the new Fantasyland on May 25th, 1983. So that was 39 years ago this month.
So yeah, 39 years. And then in July, because that's when it originally opened in 1955, it's going to be 67 years. So we're still kind of in we'll be a week past the 39-year anniversary of the remodel, but then we're just right before, or about a month before that official first opening 67 years ago, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah. And so we kind of wanted to take some time to talk about Fantasyland. We will throw out a disclaimer. This episode is definitely going to have a lot more history to it and not a whole lot of personal stuff, but there will be random facts about Disneyland that I didn't know, and I know that these guys didn't know much about it either until we were doing the research to learn more about Fantasyland that are kind of cool little tidbits. And
Kind of reminds me of that scene in the first Avengers movie where it's like they asked Tony Stark, they're like, when did you become a master at, I don't even remember what it was, and he's like, last night.
Because I think it was astrophysics or something like that. Something crazy.
Yeah.
Last night.
Yeah.
Yep.
Last night.
So yeah, we just became experts literally an hour ago. No big deal. But
Ask me any question about Fantasyland, just not that question. Okay.
Yeah. So, like I said, it is going to be a little bit more of a history based. So hopefully it's not too boring for you guys. Hopefully the little random tidbits will be awesome.
Of course we're going to put our goofy spin on it like we have to do with everything. Don't you worry.
Yep.
But speaking of history, let's get into it. Let's first take a look at Fantasyland as it debuted in 1955. So let's talk about what was there at that opening.
Okay, so the first thing that you're going to see when you walk into Disneyland or Disney World or any park is the castle. Disneyland's castle is called the Sleeping Beauty Castle, and it is actually the opening of Fantasyland. Like you walk through the Sleeping Beauty Castle, and there's Fantasyland. And it was there opening day.
Yep.
And it's still there today.
Yep, it is the oldest Disney castle.
Castle Glory. So once we get past that Sleeping Beauty Castle, we are met with various rides and attractions. And I want to talk about the first one because I absolutely love Peter Pan. That was my favorite Disney movie growing up as a child. I still have a very nostalgic view of it when I go back and rewatch it. So Peter Pan's Flight School was one of the originating opening rides, but for some reason they forgot to add in Peter Pan. They had literally every other character except Peter, and explained to me how you can have Peter Pan's flight without the character of Peter. But I digress. They got him in there eventually.
Yep. When they did the renovations, they brought in Peter Pan. There was also a restaurant. I can't remember what the name of it was because I forgot to write it down. But there was a restaurant in Fantasyland that when they were doing all the renovations, it got shut down. But it was a Pirates themed one, like from Peter Pan, like the Pirates from Peter Pan. And so a lot of the decorations from that ended up being incorporated in the ride.
And I think I remember reading that Peter Pan's Flight was one of the most popular rides when it first opened. And I think, Jenny, I think you were starting to tell an interesting fact about it, weren't you?
Yeah, so an interesting fact about Peter Pan's Flight that I have heard, I don't know how true this is, but apparently if you get onto your Disneyland app, you can tell how busy the park is at that current moment based on how long a wait Peter Pan's Flight is. Because it is such a popular ride that the park is really busy if it's like over an hour wait for Peter Pan. But you know that it's super dead if, like, right now, because I have the app open, and let me just double check to make sure I'm not telling no lies. It's only a 30-minute wait. So I would guess that, the park isn't that busy today.
Once again, this episode's coming out a week later, so
Yeah.
30 minutes may no longer be accurate, but
And the other thing to keep in mind is a lot of Fantasyland, including Peter Pan's Flight, does close down an hour early before the fireworks. So it is possible that the line is that short because they're preparing for it to be closed down for the fireworks.
gotcha.
That is another possibility of why that line is so short at this current moment while we're recording. But I do agree it is one of the most popular rides. I actually haven't been on it recently because of the fact that I just don't want to stand in that long of a line. I love the ride, but it's not worth an hour long wait, and I've never seen it less than that. And so
Never been on it despite my love of Peter Pan. I've never been on it because, as I've mentioned, I've only been to Disneyland twice. One, I was very small, I don't even really remember it. The second time was for grads night literally 10 years ago, and I probably did not want to wait in that long line because I was tired, and we'll get to a fun story about that later for one of the Fantasyland attractions. But
I was saying before the podcast started tonight that we should just take this show on the road and have a live podcast at Disneyland as we go on all these different rides, especially since Kasey is such a Disney novice.
I'm down for that. My annual pass doesn't expire until August, so we go
Well,
before August.
we made that plan when the wait time was only 15 minutes. That was okay, but now it's a 30-minute wait time. We're not going to do that.
Not no more.
All right. Anyway, so Peter Pan's Flight was their opening day. What else was their opening day?
So we have Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, which on opening day, it was actually the shortest ride in Disneyland, lasting only 93 seconds. And that it's as part of its renovation before it reopened in 1983, and that they definitely added to the ride, and it's no longer that short of a ride. But when it initially opened, it was the shortest ride at Disneyland at 93 seconds long.
Have you ever been on this ride, Amber?
Yes, I have. I've been on it several times. It's a pretty fun ride. Mr. Toad is not a very popular movie. Most people don't know who Mr. Toad is, but he basically is this toad that lives in this mansion, and he has this car, and he thinks he's all that. But then at one point in time, I'm pretty sure that's one of the ones you end up in hell, and but I don't remember.
Yeah, that was described to me before we started recording. Right after Jenny told me it's more of the kiddie land. And then she mentioned there's a ride that takes you to hell. And I'm like,
So that's the funny part, is quite honestly, while Fantasyland is definitely considered more of a kiddie land, and most like adults don't go there by themselves, like it's usually filled with a lot more kids. Funny enough, to me, some of those rides are a lot darker. Like we're gonna get into one of them that was like super dark and scary that, you know, I'm just like, this is a kid's ride.
yeah, you know what? Let's talk about that ride. Let's talk about that ride now. Snow White's Scary Adventures? What?
So
Scary Adventures?
Snow White's been through multiple renovations, and that when it initially opened, it was not Scary Adventures, it was Her Adventures. I don't know what exactly that entails. I don't know what changed in the ride exactly, but when it reopened in 1983, it did reopen as Snow White's Scary Adventures. That's the one I grew up going on, and it definitely depends on like your level of fear. If I would go as far as saying it's really actually scary, to me, it definitely was just, it took a lot of the darker aspects of the movie itself and focused in on those aspects. So it just depends on, do you consider the darker aspects of Snow White scary?
If you're a small child, probably.
I would like to say right now that, and I've seen this prop up on Facebook again. Apparently, once upon a time, like Disney, and I don't mean Walt in that sense, but like Disney in general, thought about opening a park for like the Disney villains.
That would be cool.
I'm down for that.
But I don't think that would be for kids, though.
No, probably
I think
not.
that'd be more for older, like Scary Adventures. That to me would be like an older kids ride, not a young kids ride. But
Yeah.
So, Amber, have you been on the renovated one back that reopened in 2021 with Snow White's Enchanted Wish?
Yes, and quite honestly, I don't know that I can tell a difference.
what?
Like, I feel like nothing really changed. And but funny story. So, while you're going through this ride, you're basically, a ride itself is a mine cart, and that is basically what you're in. And it's meant to look like a mine cart as you're going through. And it's Snow White's story, basically. You're going through and seeing different visual aspects of her story. And at one point in time, as you're going, there's this giant mirror, and you see the E-Queen standing there doing her whole mirror, mirror, who's the fairest one of all? And then suddenly she turns, and when she turns, she's actually the old hag. Definitely has its scary aspects for the little kids, and so it's kind of funny when you say that Fantasyland is just a bunch of kiddie rides.
That's what Jenny said. I want to be clear.
Well, that's how I was raised.
Well, no, that's what a lot of people say. That's what a lot of people say. Like, and I even say it. Like, I agree. Like, and I don't know that necessarily when I say kiddie rides that I'm necessarily meaning like your toddlers, because Snow White is probably a little scary for your toddlers. But your 8, 9-year-olds, that's probably perfect age. Fantasyland is perfect age for those guys. But I love Fantasyland, and I grew up loving Fantasyland, so I'm maybe a little biased about how awesome Fantasyland is.
As it has been stated before, I was raised in a family that my very first time going to Disneyland, as my parents tell the story, they had me wear platform shoes and a hat to make me look taller. So, like, that's why I haven't been on a lot of these rides, is because we were more about like the older kid rides. And so, whenever we did go over to Fantasyland, it was just for like Small World and Matterhorn and things like that, which we'll get into later. But one of the rides that I have been on actually later on in my life, I know that makes me sound so old. I'm not meaning for it to, but it was actually just a couple of years ago. We were tired, it was hot, and so we decided to go on the Storybook Canal ride, which is actually a really cool ride. And it was also open the first day. I'm not going to get too much into it because Amber, I know you really like this ride, but I liked how it takes you through different fairy tales and stuff like that, and like it's like these little teeny tiny villages built on the side of like this creek almost. I wouldn't really call it a river. Um, and it's like these villages show you like the story of fairy tales that we all grew up with, but not necessarily like Disney fairy tales, more like Hansel and Gretel and stuff like that.
So Hansel and Gretel, at least now, is not a part of that. It is all Disney stories, at least last time I went on it, which was
Maybe I'm
fairly
wrong.
recent. And you start off with, I'm pretty sure one of the very first ones they talk about is Alice in Wonderland. They have like a little miniaturized version of like Aladdin and that in Agrabah. They've got tons of other little like miniaturized versions, and they talk about how Tinkerbell keeps the like little plants alive, but makes sure they stay small, and that because they've got like a succulent garden that's really cute. And more recently, they've added in like Frozen, and so they've got like this big old Arendelle castle. They've got a little miniaturized oaken trading post and that. And every time we drive by, I go, "Yoo-hoo, big summer blowout!" It just comes out. Not part of the tour, like they just say, and there's Oaken's trading post, and I go, "Yoo-hoo, big summer blowout!" You can't say Oaken's trading post without saying that quote. Just saying.
True.
But yeah, so it takes you through like a bunch of little cute stories, and it's just really sweet, and I love it.
I don't think this is one that I went on when we were there for grad night, because it really seems like that Jenny really didn't want us to go to Fantasyland. She was kind of our tour guide when we went there, since she was the one who, went so often. She was kind of the little tour guide of our friend group, and I just feel like she just didn't take us. She only took us to one ride, and that was because I insisted on it, but we'll get to that ride later. But while we're kind of talking on Storybook Canal, I want to talk about real quick, because there is a connection between them, on a former attraction that was opened on opening day as well, the canal boats of the world. And I was just looking into the history of it, and Storybook Canals kind of overtook it and absorbed it, because we talked about at the start of this episode that Walt Disney had a really big imagination and kind of a big plan for what Fantasyland was going to be, and it didn't quite make it in 1955. It was really hit upon in, its 83 renovation. And the Canal Boats of the World was one of the concepts that Walt had, that it just was too grand of an idea, and they weren't able to actually do it in reality in 55 when it opened. It was too much for the time period, and it was very, very minimal. Like, there was nothing in this ride except boats in water. Like, they didn't have landscaping, they didn't have characters on this. It was just dirt and water and boats, and the boats didn't even run that well. They were constantly overheating. Like, this ride was not ready when it was opened in 1955. And as you can imagine, they weren't exactly a fan favorite due to this. So it closed down pretty soon after, I think. Let's see. Yeah, it closed down after a year, and then Storybook just kind of took over, and that was the main boat ride.
Yeah, that actually kind of makes me a little sad, because I feel like, if it was supposed to be similar to like Storybook Canals and like be like this whole like miniaturized thing where it was like the world, I could only imagine what Walt had envisioned. And like, I feel like had he had the budget and been able to do this, I feel like it would have been a great ride, and I would have loved to have experienced his vision of it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily what it ended up being, but his vision of it.
Yeah, I think Walt was truly a visionary man.
Yeah,
We all knew that.
I don't blame them for just scrapping it. There's a couple of pictures, and it really is so underwhelming to look at. It really is just dirt hills, boat in the water. That's all there is to it. Like, this does not read Disney whatsoever. This could literally be like you're in the swamps of Florida, just going about your day. Like, this is not Disney whatsoever. So I definitely understand why it wasn't that successful and why they just kind of killed it and focused more on the storybook. Because it does sound like storybook definitely meets that vision.
Yeah. And from my understanding with like reading into like the history of Fantasyland and Walt's vision like basically was almost like storybook canals, but like the whole thing being almost like that. Like he wanted it to be like when you stepped into Fantasyland, he wanted it to be that you were stepping into that story. And kind of going back to like Peter Pan's flight, the building originally was just that. It was just a building. There was nothing fancy about it. Where when it got shut down and renovated, it got renovated so that it looks like you're going into like a clock tower. So it feels more like you're stepping into the story, which is what he really wanted, was for you to feel like you were stepping into that particular story.
And that's what like Disneyland is altogether. I feel like since we've started talking about this, at some point in time, we really should just break down the other lands of Disneyland, because that's what Disneyland was like supposed to be, is like stepping into the movies. And that's why like when you first enter the park itself, you like go through those tunnels and you see the quote unquote coming attractions and stuff like that. Like, yes, I know that we've gone through and we've talked about the rides and everything like that, but maybe like breaking down the history and stuff like that, I think it would be
Yeah.
fun.
Oh, so wait. I'm looking more into the canal boats of the world, and I don't think it was overtaken by Storybook. I think it became Storybook.
It's possible.
Yeah, so I think they just scrapped the name and they just turned it into Storybook rather than they both existed at the same time.
Yeah, that's
So
possible.
I think it was Canal Boats when it opened in 55, and then they renovated it and then became Storybook in 56, which makes sense because Canal Boats was not finished whatsoever. It was an incomplete ride, so it makes sense that okay.
Okay, so the next ride that we're talking about is Dumbo. Dumbo the Flying Elephant. And it is one of those rides where you get in, you're it's an elephant, but that felt weird to say, so I was going to try to say something else. But you get into the elephant and it takes off and you go around in circles and then you touch back down. And that was also opened in 1955, and then it was amongst those that was renovated and reopened in 1983.
So, question from a novice. How is this flying ride different from Peter Pan's flying ride?
So Peter Pan's flight is more of a story type thing. You go, you're put in, the attraction is basically you get into a flying ship, a pirate ship, and you fly through the story of Peter Pan. And versus Dumbo is you know the ride in Tomorrowland that's the rockets?
Nope.
So with Dumbo, you get in.
I did take her to Tomorrowland, okay?
Did you?
We didn't ride the ride, but
yeah, when you first walk into Tomorrowland, it's the one that's right there. That's the rockets that go up and down. But so with Dumbo, you're outside. It's not an indoor one. You're outside. You get in, and you can control how high or how low Dumbo flies, basically. And so you're just flying in a circle. And then you just go around in a circle outside, and you can go up and down.
Fun fact. So at Disney World, there is Fantasyland and then there is New Fantasyland. And apparently Dumbo the Flying Elephant is so popular in Florida that they actually made another one. So there are two Dumbo the Flying Elephants at Disney World, unless that's changed. But as of the last time that I heard about it, there was two of them.
The exact same ride?
Yeah.
Are they in different locations?
I think one's in Fantasyland and then one's in New Fantasyland.
But I mean, like, are they nearby? So it's just like, oh, we count this as an extension, or they're like in absolutely different locations. They're just two of them.
I think they're close to each other. Like you could see one from the other.
Okay.
Let me open my Disney World app.
Let's consult the app here. I'm just curious, because like if they're near each other, you can just say, oh yeah, this is so popular, we built some more rides for it. It's all one, wink wink. But if they're literally like one's at the front of the park and one's at the back, that you could have made the same ride but used like different theme to it, you know?
Well, it's funny because it won't actually let me look at like the names of the rides because Disney World is like 3 hours ahead, so it's closed. But it looks like they're pretty close to each other. Like not super duper close to each other, like you have to walk, but they're pretty close to each other.
So with Disneyland, the rocket ride that's in Tomorrowland is basically the exact same thing. It's just it was re-themed to be rockets for as part of like Tomorrowland. I think they're Astro Blasters is the exact term. That and so, you know, for Disneyland they at least did completely change what it was. But Dumbo surprisingly is actually pretty popular in even Disneyland.
So it's been a while since y'all have been able to hear me say this, but we're all mad here. So let's talk about the Mad Tea Party.
So that one was one that was original.
This is the spinning cup, right?
Yes, the teacups that you just
Okay.
sit and spin around really, really fast in. I don't ride that ride. It makes me sick just watching people spin around in circles on that ride. But
Were you the one that wrote that in that one Disney group? Because somebody wrote that in a Disney group, and I was like, huh, interesting.
Very cool. Keep that in mind for the next time I go. All right. Up next, we're coming to a close on all the original rides that opened. But I think this one is a fairly popular one, and the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm starting to remember it, and that is King Arthur's Carousel, which was first made in 1922 in Toronto, and then I guess Disney moved it to Disneyland, which I think is kind of cool that they just like, hey, that's a nice carousel. We want it. And took it. And then I think Jenny also had another fun little fact about this one.
So, my little fun fact is something that probably everybody knows about Walt Disney himself, and it's how he came up with the idea of Disneyland. He used to always take his daughters out, like, you know, on daddy-daughter dates or whatever, and he would take them so that they could ride the carousel. And his daughters just loved riding that carousel, and Disney would sit there and watch them have fun and wonder to himself, why on earth were there not more rides for adults? And thus the idea of Disneyland was born, whatever you want to call it.
which is why whenever somebody shames you for being a Disney adult, laugh at them and say, "No, I'm just doing exactly what Walt meant this park to be."
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm also pretty sure that like one of the horses is named after his wife or was like really special to his wife or something like that. But I
Oh, I
don't know
didn't know
that
that.
whole history.
But yeah, this is one that I'm starting to remember more because when I first went to Disneyland, I was probably 4 or 5, and my sister would have been like 2 or 3, somewhere around there, probably closer to 3. And we went on this. My dad took us on this, and we actually have really nice portraits that I believe we got at Disneyland of us riding it. So this is one of those like core memories I do have that kind of seep back in the more I'm thinking about it of me and my dad just on it together. My sister was there, but whatever. She's not important to the story.
So, another random fun fact. So, right in front of King Arthur's carousel, and that if you're facing the castle, they actually have the sword and the stone, and you can go and pretend to pull on the sword. Little known fact was when that first opened, there is actually a button like behind the scenes somewhere that cast members could occasionally push that would actually release the sword. Ended up, for whatever reason, that didn't really work the best in their favor, and so they don't use that button anymore. So you can't actually pull the sword out, but you used to be able to pull the sword out if the cast member pushed the special magical button that's behind the scenes somewhere.
Wait, I kind of want to hear the story of why they don't push the button anymore.
I don't know the story. Otherwise, I would totally share the story.
Somebody probably took the sword or something.
Yeah, I could see that. Maybe they started swinging it around.
Yeah, so I don't know why they don't do it anymore. That was actually a random fact I learned in one of my Disneyland groups. Somebody mentioned that that's how it used to be. So, yeah, fun random fact for you.
Okay, Amber, how about you also tell us about Casey Jr.'s train?
Yeah, this is the final ride that was there on opening day.
Yep, so you've got Junior's Train, which is from Dumbo as well. This one is where a lot of your like, oh, Fantasyland is for little kids comes from, because Casey Junior's Train is definitely for your little tiny kids. And that you get on like this train where you actually get in the carts of like what the animals would have rode in. And so, you have your cart that's an elephant cart and a lion one, and each one is like unique to what that cart looks like in the movie. And you go around on this little train and I don't honestly even remember much outside of that. But it's a little train ride for kids. And I know that I used to really like it as a kid, but that's about all I could tell you of that one.
So I was the one that did a little bit of research on this one, and I found it interesting that it opened on opening day, and the next day they closed it for like a couple of weeks for testing. Like it was not really prepared for opening day, but they're like, yeah, we'll open it for opening day, and then they closed it and did some testing on it, and then they reopened it like shortly thereafter. Like,
Kind of seems like a theme there, considering what happened with the canal boats. It doesn't seem like they were fully ready for opening day, which is interesting. But
well, that's the thing about Disneyland, though, is Walt had come out and said, because he's no longer with us, that like Disneyland and Disney World will never be finished. So like a lot
Yeah.
of people did comment on the fact that like, your park's not done, and he's like, well, that's the thing is we don't want it to ever be done. We want to be continuously changing things and making it better and stuff.
yes, but there's a difference between just wanting to add things and then opening up unfinished rides.
Yeah.
There's a difference. Like I said, the canal boats, there was nothing. It was a boat in water with dirt. Nothing else.
Yeah. So those are our rides that were originally there in 1955. A lot of those rides did close down for some extensive renovations in in the 1982 timeframe, and then were reopened in 1983. Some of them, they were actually moved from the location that they were at in 1955, as well as some of them just kind of went through some transformations to bring them technology-wise, just up to what technology was back in 1983. And so there have been quite a bit of changes in a lot of those rides, but some of them haven't really changed much since day one, which is kind of cool.
It was really cool. And there's quite a bit of them too. Like, yes, they had, kind of a stutter start on the canal boats and Kasey Jr., but like Peter Pan's flight was pretty much the same except no Peter. And
Which how? How?
and everything else though, like, it's been pretty much the same since then. Just some renovations and like the main storyline is the same.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of the magic of Disney is like I still watch old Disney movies with my nieces and nephews that I watched when I was a kid, and it's just awesome. Is what it is.
Yeah.
It is. And you said that the park's never finished. They want to keep adding more to it. So let's talk about the 4 remaining rides that were added after the fact to Fantasyland. And Jenny, I think you were saying that this is one of your top ones, or you have a good story, so you want to introduce it?
The Matterhorn. First of all, the Matterhorn is really cool to me because like different things about it are in German, and I took German in high school, so I always feel like a little bit cooler because I'm like, I understood that, even though I don't understand that much German anymore. And it was opened in 1959, just so that we're all up to date on when it was opened. And the Matterhorn's just a really cool ride. There are a lot of interesting facts about the Matterhorn. Like, there used to be a break room at the top of the Matterhorn that cast members could go up there and like play basketball and stuff like that up there, which is really cool. And the Yeti used to be able to move. I don't think he moves as much anymore, or I might be getting that confused with Everest, which is in Disney World, but the
Which is
Yeti.
nothing like Matterhorn.
Nope, it's not. And actually, I think I'm wrong, and the Matterhorn is the abominable snowman, and the
No,
Yeti's
it's a
at
Yeti.
Disney World. Okay, like I said, I could be wrong. It sounds like I am. And I've heard that the best side to ride, because like they let you pick a side like to stand in line, and I've heard that the best side is the left side. Don't know how true that is, but that's what I've heard.
That's what my sister says. So we are running kind of short on time. So just some little quick things for the last 3 rides. We have Small World, which was opened in 1966.
I gotta talk about Small World, because this is like the one ride I know for sure I've ridden. So this is a glorious ride for anyone that has had a very long day walking the parks. This is it's like a good 10-15 minutes of just sitting, right? I think that's what it was. Yeah, like good. It's a solid 10-15 minutes, which is absolutely glorious when you have been up all night on a bus to get to Disneyland and all day walking around the parks, enjoying the different rides and food and stuff, and when you just need a break to just sit and not do anything. It's not the most comfortable. The boats are not very comfortable. But I think this was the only one we absolutely made a point to, because I turned to Jenny and I'm like, what's a ride we can just sit down on for a good long time? And she was like, World. I don't care that the song was stuck in our heads for like hours after that. We got to sit down for an extended amount of time, and I was so thankful. So that is my memory of It's a Small World.
So with It's a Small World, it has been in like occasionally gone through renovations. Like during the holiday season, it actually does not sing It's a Small World for the whole ride. It is intertwined with, I don't remember which Christmas song, but there is a Christmas song in there. As well as recently they just added some of the Disney characters to the attraction, and so you can kind of be like, there's that character, there's that character. And then my little rant, I guess, on It's a Small World comes from Kingdom Keepers. It made it so It's a Small World is actually kind of a scary ride for me. And I go on it, but the entire time I'm like, on the edge of my seat, like goosebumps, and you're like, why? It's just a song. It's a small world, and these dolls doing these weird dance to it. Well, in Kingdom Keepers, the dolls come alive and attack the main characters and like are trying to eat them. So in the back of my mind, that's all that's going through my head, and I'm like terrified these dolls are gonna come alive and try to eat me.
I really need to reread those books again.
I need to too, because I don't think I ever actually finished the whole series, but that is forever ingrained in my mind. So
weren't they gonna do something to it? Don't they have plans to change it or something in the next year or so? Or am I misremembering it?
Not that I'm aware of.
I haven't heard anything. There was a lot of misunderstanding about Encanto being brought to it because people were thought the way the article like was titled was totally misleading. So if you didn't actually go read the article, it sounded like they were going to basically take out It's a Small World and make it Encanto, which is not what happened. They were doing a light show projection at night that was We Don't Talk About Bruno and was that. So I don't know if maybe that's what you had seen and were thinking.
Maybe,
So.
yeah.
And then we have Alice in Wonderland that opened in 1984 or 1958. Sorry, I can.
You were half
1958.
right. They revamped it in '84, but originally they opened it in '58.
Yeah, it was revamped in 84 and also revamped in 2014. Then you have Pinocchio's Daring Journey that was opened as part of the new Fantasyland in 1983. And that's another one that falls under it's kind of terrifying for little kids, if you ask me. And
okay.
But
Why, Jenny, you got some explaining to do. Like, why did we skip over so much of Fantasyland if there's some, like, scary rides in there? Like, you made me go on the haunted, which one? The one that
Mansion?
drops? Is that the one that drops?
No.
We did go on the Haunted Mansion. We went on that and Tower of Terror.
Hollywood Tower?
Yeah, that's what it was.
Did I get you to go on the Tower of Terror? Wow, I was really good back then.
Yes,
you got both of us too.
I did a pretty good job.
Except we didn't go to Fantasyland. Like, they sounded like these scary rides were cool. Explain yourself, Jenny.
So all I can say is how I was raised is we pretty much skipped over Fantasyland. And so that's why, like, as we were going through, I'm like, I haven't been on, like, any of these rides because those were just not the rides. Those are not the rides that are important to my family. I shouldn't say it in past tense because it's still the same. So that's why.
You call yourself a Disney fanatic.
Disney freak. Get it right.
So there's a lot of like rides that, aren't there anymore that we didn't get to really talk about and that. But I do want to kind of talk a little bit about the castle before we close out because I found some interesting facts about it. So when the castle first opened, there was like this huge area in it that wasn't being used for anything. And Walt was like, okay, come on, Imagineers, we need to come up with something because this is kind of stupid having all this space and not using it. And that's when they came up with the walkthrough. And so you get to walk through like the story of Sleeping Beauty as you go through the castle. And that opened in 1957. It got changed into being a little bit different in 1959. And then in 2001, it actually shut down and didn't reopen until 2008. And so for like several years, it was like you couldn't walk through the castle. And they said they claimed it was just because it wasn't very popular. But I think it's actually kind of cool little thing to be able to walk through. So I highly recommend it. And it gets you out of the heat. Like, yes, you have to do the walking, so you don't get to sit down, but you at least get out of the heat. So
yes, there's a plus. So go through the castle, get out of the heat, and then hit up It's a Small World so you can sit down for a little bit.
Yes. So that is our wrap on kind of some of the history of Fantasyland. I hope that everybody enjoyed learning some of these cool and random facts about Fantasyland as we are celebrating the 39th year of the new Fantasyland that Walt envisioned. So, happy Fantasyland!
Please let us know what you think. Please let us know if you want to hear more of the different history from Disneyland and Disney World. And also, please let us know how much you want to hear Kasey's take if we finally get her to go back to Disneyland.
Yeah.
We'll get there eventually, but
You know, maybe once we reach like 100 listeners or whatever, we'll go.
I love
don't
how
know.
you said one and then you readjusted. You're
Yes.
like, let's hang on, let's set a more
More
doable
realistic goal here.
But let us know your favorite Fantasyland ride. Let us know maybe one that you haven't tried yet that now you are interested in. And
Let us also know your random Fantasyland facts, because, we didn't talk about all the random facts. That would take way too long. And so if you have a favorite random fact that we didn't bring up, let us know what it is.
And as always, have a magical week.
Bye.
until next time, bye.
Bye.